Hello, Graham Vincent, violin maker and musician. It's Q&A time, number 4. So yeah, I printed out the questions and let's crack into them straight away. So what we got? Andrew Parish. Andrew sent me some photos of the violin he's making from my plans, and it's coming on a storm. Actually, it's looking really good. Going to have to find someone to try it out. Was going to ask on your Q&A if it would be possible for us budding makers who have your designs to send our efforts to you for a fun appraisal. Gosh, I'd love that. That would be fantastic. I mean, my budgetary head immediately says, yeah, I can't afford to pay for the postage back, so you'd have to cover that. But if you want me to have a look at any of your violins that you've made, I'd be absolutely delighted, as long as you don't mind me talking about them on video. Obviously have a play and so on. I'm not a classical player, so they wouldn't get that kind of test, but I play, English, French, Irish, Scots, folk mainly. So yeah, no, I'd love that. That would be amazing. Yeah. Jeff Thompson, watched your glue vid. Good one, but didn't mention high temperature not to exceed. No, I didn't. I kind of self-defensive arm crossing posture there. That's embarrassing. I use my glue in a water bath, and that by default means that it won't go above 100 degrees. In fact, it doesn't get that close to 100 degrees. And so you don't get to the point where the gelatine glue is damaged. I perhaps should have said you'd never heat it directly, but that is the case. Don't heat it directly. Absolutely good point, Jeff. I use tight bond for some never to open joints, such as the back seam, then hide glue for the rest. That is perfectly sensible. I don't see any problem with that at all. Personally, I don't now use tight bond for the front and back joints, simply because it means you have to clamp them up, and I do rub joints generally for those seams with hide glue, which means I don't have to. So it's a faster and easier operation for me to just do them with hide glue. Jeff is one of the people who uses a baby bottle warmer, works a treat. Yeah, so although I've not used one personally, I know quite a few people who do, and they seem to rate them, so that might be worth consideration, because I did at one point have a look at the price of them, and you can get them on eBay or on Facebook Marketplace for next to nothing, so that might actually be a sensible option. DIY Dark Matter. Hey, Graham, I got a question for you. A customer walks into your shop and has a beautiful old violin, nothing fancy, but has sentimental value. But it does not sing as well as it should and needs to be graduated on the top and bottom plates. Sure, a fair bit of work, I'm sure. What would you say is a fair price to do this work for a person? Oh, right, okay, that's a kind of a bit of a can of worms, really. You shouldn't be working and earning less doing that than you are making violins, for example. I mean, when you look at what repair shops actually charge per hour, I don't know anyone who's working for sort of less than 40 quid, up to like 75, and I'm sure some of the posh places charge a lot more than that. This is based on UK prices, obviously. But it's that whole thing, you need to divide up your week. That's the number of hours. That's what I need to make. And don't forget all the additional costs and all the rest of it. And then you need to have a look at that job realistically. This is my the mahogany and Spanish cedar violins coming along nicely. It's got a bit of a toffee apple finish on it at the moment because I haven't cut it back yet. But this question, I mean, basically, you have got to, assuming it arrives with strings on, you've got to, first of all, put a bit of masking tape on each peg and put G on the G, D, A, E. Take those off, be careful with strings, take those off, put the bridge to one side, tailpiece, check the tailpiece gut. then you'll have it looking much like this. You've then got to take the front off. You're doing both plates, aren't you? So in my experience, you do far better to do one plate at a time, because you will start to, things will go awry if you take both plates off and you're left with this rib garland kind of changing shape on its own. So take the front off, for example. It's got a bass bar on it. You've got to take the bass bar off. Take the bass bar off. It might, if it's, from the way you're describing this particular violin, I would 50% of the time you're going to open up and find it's actually got an integral bass bar carved out of the solid. So whichever, that's got to come out. You've got to do the graduation. You've then got to put a bass bar in it. You've then got to glue it back together. You're only about a third of the way through. You've then got to take the back off. You know, being particularly careful around this joint, because I mean, all the rest have a nice overhang which masks work, but that doesn't. Go through the process of graduating it. You probably want to lift the old label off if it's got one, using sort of hot water and so on. So, you know, steam that off. So that'll take a bit of time. You've got to put it back together. So that's, you've done it. It's all glued together. Then, does it need a new bridge? What are you going to do about the sort of the damage that is visible around the edge? Is that something that is acceptable? You don't need to cover up. You need to touch it in. You're almost certainly going to have to do something around that heel button. You'd be very lucky if you don't need to do some touching in elsewhere. Is it going to need a new bridge? Do the pegs fit nicely? Does it need new strings? At this stage, you're probably going to be looking at the nut as well and saying, I could do some work on the nut. Is the tail gut okay? I mean, this job, which you've described in a couple of sentences, is one of those ones which just is ever expanding. So even if you work flat out, I can't see that that's less than 3 days work. So what's that? 3 times 8 is 24, and multiply that by whatever figure you're using, and you're into the thousands, basically. And don't do it for less. Don't do it for less. Don't say, well, that seems like a lot of money, so I'll have to charge less. I mean, you basically work out how long it's going to take and tell them. And if they don't want to pay, you don't have to do it. But the last thing you want to do is a complicated job which takes a lot of your time. And because if you've got any, I mean, I'm sure most of the sort of people who will be working on violins are interested in doing a really good job. That's the nature of the job. That's why you're fiddling around with violins. So you will end up spending the best part of a week and getting not enough money for it. So be realistic about the pricing. Tell them what it's going to be. And let's say, what did I say? 24 hours. Let's say you've quoted several £1,000s and they say, well, it's just not worth it. You can say, no, you're right. It's just not worth it. There you go. But you have to be realistic. You really do. Anyway, I've gone on far too long about this, but you get the point, I'm sure. You understand where I'm coming from, I suspect. If you want to do these sort of things for free, do it as a hobby, basically. If they're coming to your shop, you know, and you're not trying to get ripped off, price it properly and do the work well and enjoy the work. If you're not getting paid, you won't really enjoy the work so much. You'll feel like you're being used. You know, you may as well go to a second-hand shop and buy the cheap violin yourself, do the work, and then you'll have a violin that works well and is worth some money. So, okay. Pardon me. Okay, moving on. Got a question which I missed last time from Matthew Gibbons, 813. When you use reclaimed woods for your tops, do you only use quarter-sawn boards? That's a really good question. I use as close to quarter-sawn as I can possibly get. That's the answer. But you know what? I'm going to have to do some editing on this video because I've got a couple of images that I really would like you to see. There have been quite a few examples of French, particularly, cellos made with softwood which is slab cut. And that goes against everything everyone says. But apparently they sound pretty good. Not only that, but many of us who do one piece sort of backs, we use slab sawn timber a lot. If you use, for example, if you ever use bird's eye maple, that is slab sawn. It doesn't look like that if it isn't. So, you know, there's a lot of precedent for using slab sawn timber. Not so much in the front, where people get alarmed if they see stuff that doesn't look slab sawn. Hang on a minute, I have got, this is a piece of Western white pine which came from a draw side of a deep draw, but it wasn't quite deep enough to do a whole front, and you won't be able to see the grain very well, so I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw some lines on it to show you where the grain is on this. So over here the grain is, I wonder if you can see that even, and then it's like that there, and then by the time it's over here it's really, yeah. So on this one, for example, that's what I've ended up with. You know, it's pretty much quarter sawn here, it's cranking over a bit there, and then by the time it's over here it's coming through like that, and as you'd expect, it's got really nice tight grain across here, and it just slowly broadens out as you go over here. And I will use that so that the broad grain is on the bass side, and that will sound lovely. I can guarantee this one will sound great. So yeah, there's an aesthetic issue. Will people accept it? You know, does it fit with people's expectations? And is it what you want to be doing? So personally, because have a slightly inquisitive, strange nature, it doesn't bother me. And I'm actually looking forward to making a violin with slab sawn softwood spruce on the front, just purely to try it out. Like I say, there have been or will be some images coming up. So good question, actually, I like that. Next one, Mick Carr. Hi Graham, really enjoying these Q&As. First, thanks for my question. Transitioning from guitar building to violin making. I will definitely be giving it a go after my current build, a hollow jazz guitar. So, I mean, my question is it weird that I want to make a violin even though I can't play one? No, I think you're just you're coming to your senses. That's what's going on. Now, I mean, I love the violin. I love the sound of the violin. I love the way they look. They're a nice size to work on. Everything about them is great, basically. So I have a bit of a love-hate relationship when it comes to playing the little things. But no, I completely get where you're coming from. Don't let it put you off. You know, if you find yourself making more than one, it's inevitable you'll find yourself trying to learn how to play it as well. So it just enjoy it, love it. I don't have an issue with that. Why would I have an issue? I think personally, you probably will enjoy the whole thing more if you do play it to some extent. But I think there's tons of satisfaction to be had just simply from the making part of it. So seems sensible to me. Brennan 95. No, sorry, 985. Brennan 985. How did you learn to make violins? That's a good question. I went to the London College of Furniture as a guitar maker. I came back to the southwest of England, set up as a guitar maker. Basically did that for a while, failed to make any money at it, and ended up going into furniture making, furniture design. I then ended up in architectural design. I got a job because I knew all about architectural joinery and no one else at the practice did. There wasn't enough architectural joinery work to do, so I ended up doing sort of drawing of properties as well, actually construction drawings for them and what have you. Because of the person I am, I then sort of pursued and became qualified as an architectural technologist, set up my own practice, worked at that. But I didn't really enjoy it that much, it has to be said. I mean, there's a certain fascination with buildings, but they're not the same as musical instruments. They really aren't. So I obviously had been playing the guitar. I had been playing the guitar. I played the drums as well for a while. My daughter, at the age of 4, when I was 35, 36, decided she wanted to play the violin. And so we looked around at various teachers and what have you, and we came across a chap called Robert Martin, who said, if one of you parents learns at the same time, then she'll not see it as something that you have to do whilst you're at school. She will actually really go for it, and she'll get more out of it. This is using the Suzuki method of teaching, by the way. Oh, the dog's barking outside. Quiet. Anyway, so I thought, I'd love to play the violin. Why not? So I'll give it a go. So that's what I did. I started playing. Inevitably, I'm just going to have to open the door to let the dog in. Sorry, won't be a second. There you go. Normal service will be resumed. Okay, so I, because I have a sort of inquisitive nature, I started buying violins on eBay. And that means you end up buying a load of violins that need some repair work. Obviously, I'm pretty familiar with sort of guitars and all the rest of it. It was a fairly simple process to start repairing them. I then inevitably thought, oh, I'm going to make myself one of these. And I did. I sort of basically started making. I went on a 1 week long course at Halsey Manor, just so that I was in a place where I could actually ask questions of somebody. And then, just carried on from there and got to the point where I started selling them. And now it's how I earn my living. So there we go. That's how I got here. God, that's only the first of one of your questions. What kind of musicians buy yours? Symphony players, country fiddlers, or a mix? Or something somewhere in between. Yeah, right. Well, I'm definitely a folk fiddler. I play Irish, Scots, English folk. I play a bit of French as well, and I do play the odd classical piece. But I'm at the folk end of the spectrum, really. But I've sold to just anyone who plays the violin. Really, I know there are at least 3 or 4 violins that I know of mine which play in sort of amateur orchestras. I know quite a few. I'm luckily I'm in the wonderful position of having sold violins to several well-known folk fiddle players, so they're used professionally. So yeah, I mean, but I've always maintained that a violin is a violin, and there isn't a fiddle and it's not a different instrument from the violin. I think, sure, there are some things which don't need to be within such tight parameters on a violin that's going to be used by a fiddle player. They'll accept more idiosyncrasies from a particular violin. For example, I mean, although I suspect this is going to be a lovely sounding violin, there's no way that a classical player will buy this, simply because it doesn't fit within that prescribed kind of field that they have to, that area they have to conform to. And that's not a criticism of classical violinists or the classical music world at all. It is what it is, and it's they want to do things that particular way, and they set themselves those constraints and produce that amazing music within that tight set of constraints. Fantastic. What are the characteristics of ebony that require we find a replacement, assuming you don't want to use ebony? that matches it so well instead of a different readily available timber? Very good question indeed. And it's probably because we're just so used to seeing a black fingerboard and black fittings, and they provide a nice contrast against the rest of the violin. I mean, obviously we're used to seeing some Baroque violins with like a boxwood, sometimes a boxwood fingerboard. There are certainly some timbers that are plenty hard enough to use, but it's a really good question. I think a stained timber somehow feels like cheating. I think I'm very happy with the Richlight that I'm using. It's so durable and tough, stable, consistent, that I personally, unless something else comes along that I haven't been expecting, I'm really happy with that myself. So the answer to your question is, we don't have to. We don't have to find something. We could use a number of other timbers. It's just a question of people want to do so or not. I mean, obviously there are some practical issues. For example, if you used rock maple, which is a lovely hard timber, it would get it would stain, it would get dirty, it would look pretty grubby. I mean, the one thing about having a black fingerboard is it does remain looking pristine with very little maintenance, I guess. You know, it might be as simple as that. Question 5, which is more of a statement, really. Another violin maker I watch uses tight bond for joining the back and front plates, hypothecating that those two joints are the ones you never want to come apart. Would hide glued still be the best in that situation, given its likelihood to disjoint under shock? Yeah, I think I covered this just now, actually. Yeah, I mean, there's a powerful argument for that. It makes great sense. I don't have an issue with that at all. I basically don't, simply because I'm using hide glue, and as I say, if I'm doing a rub joint, I don't even have to cramp it up. So it's kind of easier and faster for me to use hide glue than it is to use tight bond. I know that you think of tight bond as being that much easier, but it does mean you have to get out all the cramps and everything, and then find a space to put this thing and leave it whilst it cures. Whereas with a rub joint, if you do it in the vise, take it out of the vise, and then you can literally go and prop it up on a shelf. So for me, it's kind of almost easier. Hope that answers that one. We're getting through these now. Gervais Galant. This is more of a statement, and it's useful information. Thanks for this. Like your commentary. I liked your commentary about guitar tuners. This is when I was talking about the possibility of I think it was a reply to DIY Dark's Matter question about why don't people use guitar tuner type pegs. I liked your commentary about guitar tuners. I put guitar machine heads on a stick dulcimer I built a couple of years ago. Just the weight alone convinced me not to try this on a fiddle. Even ebony pegs seem pretty light by comparison. Yep, I think that kind of just pretty much confirms what I said. Interesting. Thank you for that. Talking of DIY Dark Matter, we've got another question here. Okay, just one question for you this time. I've looked all over YouTube for videos on measurements, and I've found a few, but would you consider doing a video on the measurements of the violin? And it can be for the raw, untouched wood as far as it goes, like the front or back plates, the blocks and ribs, and the neck length and the width, and the measurements of the scroll before it's carved would be great. Yeah, I could do. Absolutely. Why not? Why not? Perhaps I'll do that. I mean, obviously, there's going to be some variation depending on the model that you're doing. I mean, the actual scroll carving, for example, does vary. This one I did really narrow, simply because I didn't have a sufficiently wide piece of mahogany, and I thought I can either glue bits on, or I can just change the scroll slightly. So I opted to sort of cut in more deeply, so it still had that pronounced look, but change the dimension, to make that work. But I think I got away with it. Who knows? So yeah, Not a bad idea. I'll have a look at that. If it fits in with the sort of subjects and so on that I want to discuss, then yeah, why not? Sticulari. As an aside, the name Sticulari kind of made me laugh a few times because Sticulari, I had to look it up, honestly, is Latin for stipulation. So it's like a legal term, but Old Sticulari has put a K in there, so it's like a fiddlestick or whatever. So yeah, full marks on the witticism there. Entire spruce violins, because yes, I was musing and wittering on about the possibility of making a violin completely in a softwood rather than just using the front in spruce and everything else in hardwood. I was kind of thinking, well, if spruce is that wonderful, why don't I try making a complete violin in it? And it's something I still am seriously thinking of doing at some stage. I seem to remember from the Magic Fiddle series of yesteryear an item on Hardanger fiddles using spruce throughout, thicker on the back and the front. And I did a bit of trawling on YouTube, and Sticulari, Steve, you are exactly right. I found it, and I put a link on the last Q&A sort of comments. Yeah, it's interesting. He didn't. He's apparently quite a well-known maker of Hardanger fiddles. And he also wanted to demonstrate that you didn't have to use posh wood on everything. I'm going off on a tangent. Not that all the wood used on Hardangers is particularly posh. They use a lot of birch, for example, on the back and sides and so on. A nice wood. But anyway, on this program, you can see this thing being played. It's got a softwood front and a softwood back, although he left the back about 10 millimeters thick in the center, which is pretty beefy. So there we go. It's a little bit difficult to compare the sound with other violins because Hardangers have their own particular and beautiful, I think, sound. Because they use lighter strings, the tuning is lower, the string length is actually shorter. Most of them have a considerably shorter neck. The tunings are all different. And of course, you've got all the complementary strings as well. So there's a sort of inbuilt kind of resonance going on, which you don't have so much on a 4-string violin. So there we go. It was really interesting. I watched the whole program. It was great. Yeah. So I think we've done on the questions that are in. Like I say, I'm probably going to have a quick edit on this and put in a couple of images and so on. Yeah, thank you for those questions. Fantastic. Really enjoyed it. If you have any more questions, please leave them on this video, and then I will have a look at this before I do the next one, which will be in a week's time. So please like and subscribe. Hope you've enjoyed it. I have. I really have. So look after yourselves. Cheers, folks. Bye.